Thank you for joining in the practice. A very warm welcome to all of you. Welcome home. And in many ways, that's exactly what this practice is. That's what all meditation practices are. Just an opportunity to return back home, to that space where we came from, where nothing changes, but in a very beautiful sort of way where there's an infinite kindness, infinite wisdom. And just to help the mind, let's begin today's practice by just reminding ourselves, or rather dividing our existence into three parts. Because sometimes it's all so abstract when we say who we truly are, returning home. What does that mean? It's because in the mind, it paints pictures of our home, it paints pictures of different concepts as to who we believe ourselves to be. And so we use some of the teachings from some of the sages, from some of our teachers who claim to have experienced this space called home. And they simplify it by dividing our existence into these three parts. The first part, our bodies. You can wriggle your fingers, wriggle your toes, feel the different sensations within your body, and then notice the way in which your body interacts with the air around you, with your clothing, with your furniture, with your flooring. The body with its five senses. Part one, according to the teachers. This is just part one. And we're going to use this body a lot in today's practice because our body with its five senses, they become our doorways into this present moment. And so you're getting a glimpse into what the room's temperature is like, what your clothes feel like, the privacy that you have at this particular moment, the comfort that you have at this particular moment, the comfort of your cushions, your chairs, the heating system within your home or your room. And then there is part two, the second part, to who we are or we believe ourselves to be, and that they call the mind. And notice that the mind, it's not as straightforward as the body, because the body is definitely here in this room, seated on this furniture, on these cushions, on these chairs. But the mind, notice how the mind, it often moves. In fact, it always moves. And you'll notice that even if it's relatively quiet, even if it's aligned itself to the body right now, if the postman or a delivery person were to ring your doorbell, if somebody were to knock on your window, the mind would react to those sounds. Should I answer it? Who is that knocking on my window? Should I open my eyes? And so the mind constantly reacting to the world around us, the world outside of us. And these are just very simple changes, knocks on the door, doorbells ringing, but sometimes there are unexpected bills. Sometimes we read the news and there is something that gets us all worked up and worried. But that's the mind projecting itself into the future. And sometimes we lose people who are, or we seemingly lose people who are very dear to us, either through that which is called death, or somehow just geographical divisions and partings. There are many reasons. And then the mind reacts. We feel unhappy, we feel pain. But then that's the mind, because the mind remembers having that person next to us, with us. The mind remembers our histories together, all of the wonderful times we had together. And the mind holds on to the past and refuses to release that person or that change that enters into our life, being very attached to the past. But that's the power of the mind. And so that's why the sages, many of the teachers, refer to the mind as a separate entity, because you could be thinking of all of those things. And in fact, I would have put those ideas in your mind right just now. And you would have seen your mind react, or rather, your body react through emotions. But then the body is here. The body is on this chair. The body is in this room. And that gives us a glimpse into the way in which the mind travels. Very often, with us having very little control over it, because of the numerous programs that are running automatically within the mind. And if you were looking for a definition of the mind, I think the Indians who studied the mind in great detail, they had 6 or 7 or 8 different words for the mind, which we in the English language describe simply with one word, the mind. But one of my favorite English definitions of the mind was one given by a teacher called Michael Singer. And he simply defines the mind as an energy field that, that has been programmed. An energy field that has been programmed and can be reprogrammed, which is why no medical doctor will ever find a particular biological area within the body where the mind exists, because It's an energy field, according to Michael Singer. And that was part two, the mind. And notice some of the qualities of the mind. Just notice where it is right now. If it's here in the present moment, all well and good. Because that was what the mind was meant to function as, a filter through which to translate our present moment. And so if you know that you're sitting here, if you know that you're in a private room, if you know that you're wearing these clothes and this is how they feel and the temperature around you is this way and you're seated on a particular type of furniture, that's good because the mind is feeding you all of this information. It is translating the present moment for you. But anything other than that, that meeting that you have to attend in 1 or 2 hours, that appointment you had earlier this morning, those events that took place over the weekend, they're not relevant to our practice. And in this practice, we notice and we release that which is not relevant, bringing our attention back to this present moment. And you will also notice how the mind, it exists and creates time. Which is why present moment is so precious to us, because it brings us outside of time into the security and the stillness and the peace of this moment. Notice we've only touched on the two parts that we believe ourselves to be, the body and the mind. And then the teachers and the sages, they refer to the third part. That which I had started off today's practice as by referring to as home. But if you can imagine 3 circles, a small circle right in the middle, that being represented by the body, and then a slightly larger circle around the inner circle, a larger circle, and that one can be represented by the mind. And then finally, everything outside of these 2 circles, that whole space outside of these 2 circles, that is home. You can call it being, you can call it presence, you can call it awareness. Many religions, they refer to it as simply as God. But these labels don't matter. But it gives you a glimpse into how this space, which these teachers say represent our true selves, is a space beyond the comprehension and understanding of the mind, because it lies, of course, it lies beyond The mind, if you can imagine the mind as that circle, and everything else outside of the circle, the streets outside your home, the whole continent or island upon which you live on, being outside of that circle, the whole, all of the space surrounding this planet called Earth, being outside of that tiny circle called the mind, and that even tinier circle called the body. And it doesn't end there. It's a space that goes beyond this planet, beyond the moon, beyond the sun, beyond the stars. With no end. No end, for the universe continues to expand. But yet it includes everything. It includes every star, it includes every planet, every asteroid, every rock, everything on this planet. Every person, every animal, every insect, every form of plant life, every stone, every grain of sand. And this is why most of our teachers, whether they originated from religion or otherwise, they speak of kindness, they speak of an unconditional generosity and love. For once we tap into this space, once we shift our identification from body and mind to this being, this witnessing presence, we begin to see ourselves in every person, in every leaf, in every sunset, in every tree. It's a space where loneliness can no longer coexist. It is a space free of fear, free of pain, or so they say. But these are just words, and we're here to experience, not think. So let us begin our practice, which is a very simple, simple practice. We return back to the body, which we know is here in this moment called the present moment. And we know that the present moment is quite different from the past, quite different from the future. And we know that we have easy access into the present moment through our bodies, through our five senses. And at any moment in your day, you can decide which sense you would like to use as your doorway into the present moment. Sometimes some senses may be more relevant than the others. For example, in this practice, most of us, we have our eyes closed, but it doesn't matter whether your eyes are open or closed. But if they are closed, it simply eliminates some of the distractions that often stimulate thought. And you can start with your sense of sight. If your eyes are, even if your eyelids are closed and shut, just notice the silhouette, the play of light through your eyelids. Some of us may call it dark brown or red. Notice at the same moment how awake and alert you feel. Because within your mind, you will notice how the mind associates the eyes being closed with sleep, with falling underneath thought, below thought, which is what often happens when we're asleep, isn't it? We're not really aware of our thinking process. We enter into a realm underneath thought. But at this moment, you're very aware. You are awake. I am awake, perhaps more awake than usual because we're aware of sounds around us. We're aware of sensations that we wouldn't otherwise be aware of. Simply because most of the distractions have been turned off, have been switched off. We're not reading, we're not browsing the net, we're not listening to music. The dust is settling, and we are watching the dust settle. The mind, with its different thoughts, each thought represented by a dust particle sparkling in the sun. And because there are no new winds blowing in through the windows, because we are not allowing in any new distractions, we can simply observe those which are already here. They sparkle in the light and then they disappear as they simply move and gravitate downwards, settling on whatever surface it is underneath them. You release the need to judge these thoughts, these dust particles as good, bad, desirable or undesirable. You simply observe, smiling even as gravity takes over and they return back home. Notice how your mind's eye allows you to imagine even these images. Recognize your ability and your power over the mind to direct it in this way. Many of us often reach practices such as this after becoming quite exhausted through our identification with the mind, which takes us into the past, the future, many different places. But notice how simple it is for you to now direct your mind. And now direct your mind to your ears, another incredible doorway into the present moment. Notice the different sounds around you, within you. Some of them so close that they come from within your own body. Some of them from within your room, a computer fan, ticking of a clock, the humming of a fan or a radiator that heats up your room. And then some sounds from further away. And sometimes just simply the ringing of your eardrums in the background. That ringing that's always there, that's sometimes simply missed. For me, it's the wind outside my window. There are winds, and what can you hear? Notice the way in which your mind judges some of these sounds. And it's nice noticing this just simply because the mind will always notice those sounds that it either likes or dislikes. And so it doesn't notice all of the sounds. There are many other sounds which it doesn't notice. It usually starts by simply noticing sounds that it dislikes, dogs barking, maybe mobile phones ringing, sounds that shouldn't be a part of a meditation, sounds that the mind has created rules about for practices such as this, sounds that shouldn't be here. And what does the word shouldn't imply? It means that there is a standard. It means that the mind is comparing this particular sound against either the past or the future, a measure, a comparison, an indication that we have identified ourselves once again with the mind. Try a different approach now. Call the sounds around you. Refer to all of these sounds simply as a symphony. And so each sound represented by an instrument in this incredible orchestra called the world, with its invisible conductor, a conductor whose knowledge in composing pieces is perfect, a master. And with this, allow every sound to exist as it does, allowing it to have its place and space within the symphony, giving every sound permission to exist. And soon shifting your attention from these sounds to the spaces in between the sounds that must emerge from now or then, recognizing that these sounds, in fact, every sound is audible only because of the silence behind it. Appreciating the silence, which allows these sounds to emerge into the foreground, appreciating the silence in the background and those spaces in between every note. And then there are players in this orchestra whom you have not yet noticed. And those are the sounds that matter very little to you, that you neither like nor dislike. And these are the sounds that many facilitators, meditation and mindfulness facilitators, refer to simply as neutral sounds. Have you found any neutral sounds? Maybe the computer fan that you've somehow grown very accustomed to, or the sound of your breath, or the subtle beat of your heart within your chest, or the gentle breeze blowing against your window. Now, these neutral sounds, you will find them everywhere you go. Sounds that matter very little to you. And these neutral sounds, they will always be precious tools for your practice. You may be in a busy street, you may be at the post office, you may be in a shopping mall, you may be in a crowded park, but you have the option, the choice of directing your mind to seek out these neutral sounds, which you neither like nor dislike, and then focus on these sounds, on one particular sound. If this practice were taking place right now, which it is, which neutral sound would you focus on? Dive into this sound, noticing those gaps of silence in between it, that silence behind it, and the sound itself. And my reason for guiding you towards This particular neutral sound is simply because it will not stimulate new thought, because it matters very little to you, but it will be an aid. It will help each and every one of us here to slow the momentum of the mind down. If not completely, just a little bit. Listen. And then there would be the sense of smell and the sense of taste, which for most of us may not be so relevant right now at this moment, but will become relevant when we eat our foods, when we cook our foods, when we find ourselves in the showers and near perfumes, even in nature, the sense of smell. A sense of taste with every bite, every fluid, every drink that we consume, tasting like never before, releasing all thoughts that are not relevant to the consumption of that particular item of food, tasting it for the first time, which is the only time that can ever exist in the present moment. Every taste bud exploding as the flavors seep through the taste buds, through the sense of smell. And then the sense of touch, which is complex. But yet, the very reason we seek comfort, physical comfort, through the soft embrace of a close one or a loved one, through the incredible clothing, fabrics, bed linen, towels that we use, the warm baths and the hot water showers, all for the sense of touch. Bring your attention to the clothing. Experience your clothing, just its softness. And by softness, I simply mean its ability to mold and shape itself around your arms and your shoulders and your chest, your mid regions of your body. How these fabrics allow your knees to bend and your elbows to bend. And then there are the sensations that take place, not only around your body, but within. And for this, a very simple tool would be the breath. I'll ring the bell, and when I ring the bell, bring your attention to the flow of air through your nostrils, through your nasal passage. And so the spotlight, it releases those surfaces around your body and it begins to focus on the breath. And one reason we often use the breath in our practice is simply because, just like those neutral sounds, for most of us, the breath is quite neutral. We neither detest it, nor do we find ourselves obsessed with it. It just is, flowing in the background as we sleep, as we walk, as we cook, as we eat, as we play, as we talk. The only difference at this particular moment being our level of awareness. Of the interaction between these air molecules and the sensitive cells within our nasal passages, around the nostrils and the upper lip. And it's often worth reminding ourselves that this is not about thinking the breath, but experiencing it in the present moment. And this is a good thing, because when your mind wanders, as it surely will, when it's distracted, it doesn't matter, because you're not interested in the previous breath. You're not interested in the last 100 breaths. You are always only interested in the breath that is either flowing in or out, in the only moment that ever exists, this moment. Little things, simple things, the temperature. But this is where you invite the mind, because you don't know what temperature is until the mind gets involved in the practice. Because in this moment, if you were existing purely in this present moment, there would be no cool, warmth, nice, not nice, desirable, undesirable. Everything is simply a sensation. There's no comfort, there's no discomfort. But now you invite the mind to translate these sensations. And when you breathe in, you'll notice that the mind will feed you information about the breath being slightly cool, slightly crisp. And as you breathe out, you will notice the mind feeding you information about how warm it feels, how humid the breath feels. And this is the proof that you need of the mind existing within time, simply because the mind compares the in-breath against the humidity and the warmth of the out breath. allowing you to define the sensation as warm or cool, humid or dry. You are using your mind purely to translate the present moment. And this also becomes the perfect moment to recognize that the mind only thinks of one thing at a time. And so, as it focuses on this particular sensation of warmth, humidity, coolness, crispness, as the mind focuses on the direction of the flow, whether it's an in breath or an out breath, you're not thinking about your meetings from this morning or later on. You're not thinking about what happened last weekend. Your mind has aligned itself into the present moment, and there is unity, alignment between mind and body. And where is the body? Here, in the present moment. And it's so much easier to notice when the mind drifts away with its thoughts. Now that we have experienced the present moment. For the present moment is an experience, not a memory, an experience. And so, in practices such as this, there's nothing to remember. There's no right, there's no wrong, there's just what you're experiencing at this moment. Experiences that allow us to experience our home more completely, more fully. Allowing us to then be aware when we have left and have drifted away into the past or into the future. Sitting, breathing, being here, now. And now let's use the bell a little bit, just to release any remaining pockets of stress or tightness that we may still be holding on to within our bodies. And just a very brief introduction into this. Our bodies. We remind ourselves that our bodies does not have the ability to distinguish between a thought and reality. And so all those meetings we have to attend, all those things that we hold on to, the body believes that it is happening right now, and very often it just releases all sorts of chemicals that get us ready to either fight or flee. And sometimes these chemicals have been within the muscles and the body for so long that certain organs, certain muscles have been in a very consistently tense and tight state. So we'll use the sound waves from this bell to loosen all of these knots. Maybe not all of these knots, but some of these knots. And it begins by simply reminding ourselves that these bodies, with their muscles and their nerves and the skin and the bones, are made up of nothing but atoms and molecules. Atoms and molecules that do not really touch. They simply vibrate and create immense amounts of space in between them. So much so that scientists remind us that more than 99.9% of our bodies is pure space. And so let this particular ringing of the bell, if you can visualize it like a pebble dropping onto the center of a still pond, ripples appearing, and these sound waves moving as the ripples do, inviting them to move through your facial muscles, through the eyes, through the brain, through the ears, through the cheeks, through the gums, through the jawbone, loosening all of the tissue, all of the cells, allowing the brain to rest, allowing the eyes to balance themselves, and the ears and the jawbone to loosen, and the lips no longer tight, and this bell for the neck. And here's one for the shoulders, allowing your shoulders to drop under the weight of your arms, inviting these next sound waves to move into and through your chest, reaching through every organ within the chest, every muscle, the lungs, and now the stomach muscles, and the digestive system within, and the lower back. And here's a bell just for the spinal column, the whole spinal column with its vertebrae stacked one on top of the other with precious, intricate nerves within that carry fluids, electrical charges, and so much more. Energies that we haven't even began to understand. And the pelvic region, and the legs and the feet and the knees and the toes. And now the final bell for the whole body. A body filled with awareness. An awareness that we will create an intention. An awareness that we will bring with us as we experience the day unfold before and around us, from breath to breath, moment to moment. Thank you.